I sat across the desk, momentarily speechless, as the sharply dressed man tapped away on his tablet. Your operating costs are too high. I've already identified 3 areas where we can trim the fat, he said, looking pleased with himself. Starting with employee salaries. That was the moment I realized what he really meant. After 14 years of dedication to Westside Animal Care, I was being told my work was now worth just 60% of my current paycheck. It's not personal, Dr. Marlowe. It's just how we do business, he added with a corporate smile. We need to align your compensation with what's standard in the field. Before we dive in, we'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below, letting us know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. We're excited to connect with all of you. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more amazing content. Now back to the story. My name is Kendra Marlowe, and I'm 41 years old. I've spent my entire career in this one clinic, caring for the pets of Cedar Falls. What began as an entry-level job straight out of veterinary school became a mission I gave my heart to. I helped grow this place from a tiny 2-room setup into a clinic the entire neighborhood relied on. I understand this is a transition, I said, trying to stay composed while my heart pounded. When would these changes start taking effect? Next pay cycle, he replied without looking up. We'll need your answer by Friday. When Dr. Emerson, the original founder, sold the clinic to Northwell Pet Health, we were all anxious, but he had reassured us. They believe in what we've built, he said at the farewell dinner. Now, just 3 weeks after the ink dried on the deal, I was being handed a choice: accept a devastating pay cut or walk away from the place I considered my second home. I had trained every assistant here, memorized hundreds of pet names, and built lifelong relationships with clients who trusted me to care for their animals. I appreciate the honesty, I told him, standing up. You'll have my answer by Friday. As I turned to leave, he added, Oh, and Kendra? We're rolling out a new scheduling platform next week. The manual's been emailed. Out in the lobby, I paused by the front desk where Layla, our receptionist of 12 years, was updating files. Her concerned look said it all. You too? I asked under my breath. She nodded. 30% cut. And they cut my hours. What are you going to do? I whispered, careful not to be overheard by the families in the waiting room. Layla glanced at the people waiting. The elderly man with the golden retriever at his feet, the mother holding a carrier, the little girl gently stroking a bunny. I don't know yet, she said quietly, but something tells me things are changing, and not in a good way. That was the moment something shifted inside me. This wasn't just about a paycheck anymore. It was about everything we stood for. The clinic's values, our relationships, our integrity. I looked around at the space that had defined my adult life. The walls, the exam rooms, the smell of antiseptic and fur. This was more than just a workplace. It was the heart of something I wasn't ready to let die. Being a vet, to me, was never just about science or surgery. It was about connection. I'd treated dogs from puppyhood to their final days. I'd written sympathy cards, cried with grieving families, and celebrated miraculous recoveries. I'd given out my personal number for emergencies, received drawings from grateful kids, and filled my fridge with thank you notes and pet photos. These weren't just clients, they were family. The next day at lunch, I turned to Reed, our newest vet, and asked, You worked at a Northwell-owned clinic before, right? He nodded, his expression dark. He was only 32 and had joined us 6 months earlier, but he'd seen the other side already. 3 years, he said. It always starts the same. First it's cuts, then it's efficiency, then they start pushing you to sell services the animals don't really need. I already had a feeling I knew where this was headed. 3 years. It's always the same formula. Cut costs, then ramp up productivity, and eventually they expect you to start pushing add-on services to drive revenue. And what happens to the quality of care? I asked, though I already knew the answer in my gut. Everything turns into a numbers game, he said, poking half-heartedly at his salad. How many appointments you squeeze into an hour? How many wellness packages you convince people to buy? How much money you bring in per day? He sighed. I left because they told me to recommend dental cleanings to dogs that didn't need them, just to hit sales goals. That afternoon, between patients, I stepped into my office and called Dr. Emerson, the clinic's retired founder. He'd traded city noise for lakefront serenity and was finally working on that memoir he always talked about. I had no idea, Kendra, he said, his voice thick with regret. Their reps promised me they understood the soul of the place. If I'd known this was coming, I never would have sold. It's not your fault, I told him. You earned your retirement. I need to figure out what to do next. What are you thinking? He asked. I hesitated. I'd been carrying the thought around for days, but saying it aloud would make it real. I'm considering opening a clinic of my own. There was a pause, just long enough to make me nervous. Then he said, You should. You have the skills, the client base, and this town needs a practice that puts animals first, not spreadsheets. After we hung up, I stared at the framed degrees on the wall. I thought about the conversations I'd had over the years with clients who were grateful that we didn't run things like a conveyor belt, that we cared. Then a knock broke my train of thought. It was Rosa, our lead vet tech of 8 years. Sorry to interrupt, Dr. Marlowe, but Mrs. Jenkins is here with Baxter. She asked for you specifically, even though she's booked with Dr. Stein. Tell her I'll be right there, I said, standing. As I walked into the exam room to see the 10-year-old beagle I'd cared for since he was a pup, everything became crystal clear. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about preserving something we built with compassion and care. Friday morning came, and with it a kind of mental clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. I'd spent every spare moment researching locations, cost estimates, and startup loans. I called 3 former classmates who'd successfully opened their own clinics. The more I learned, the more I believed I could do it too. At 9 on the dot, I knocked on Brian's door. Come in, he called, his voice already distracted. He was in the middle of a video call but quickly told the screen, I'll call you back, before spinning his chair to face me. Kendra, good, have you made your decision? I have, I said, handing him a sealed envelope. This is my 2-week notice. His smile flickered, and for just a split second, he looked surprised. You're walking away over a routine salary adjustment? I'm pursuing a different opportunity, I corrected. And I wanted to give notice the right way, so my patients aren't left in the lurch. He leaned back, sizing me up. I expected pushback from some of the staff, sure, but not you. You're a senior vet. This is how business works. People have to adapt. I understand business realities, I said, holding his gaze. And I've made a business decision of my own. He shrugged and reached for the envelope. HR will get your paperwork together. I assume you're going to another clinic? Something like that. Word of my resignation spread through the building faster than wildfire. By lunchtime, Layla, Rosa, and Reed had all pulled me aside in quiet corners. Is it true? Layla whispered as we stood by the filing cabinets. Yes, I said softly. 2 weeks from today. What are you going to do? I took a deep breath. I'm opening my own practice. There's a place on Elmwood Avenue I've been looking into. Her eyes lit up. Seriously? That's incredible. She leaned in. Let me know when you need a receptionist. The rest of the day played out much the same. Reed gave me a look across the treatment room. Keep me posted, he said with a nod that carried more weight than words. That evening, I was back at my kitchen table, surrounded by scribbled notes, spreadsheets, and takeout containers. Just as I reached for my 3rd cup of tea, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Rosa. Whatever you're planning, I'm in. The weight of it all hit me just before bed. On my way out of the clinic that afternoon, Mrs. Davidson had stopped me in the parking lot. Her cat, Oliver, had been under my care since she adopted him 6 years ago. I overheard someone saying you're leaving, she said, clearly upset. Is that true? When I nodded, she didn't hesitate. Wherever you go, Oliver and I will follow you. That one sentence, Oliver and I will follow you, hit me deeper than I expected. I'd always known my clients trusted me, but I hadn't truly realized the depth of those connections until that moment. To them, I wasn't just a veterinarian. I was their veterinarian. And that meant something the new corporate owners clearly didn't understand or value. I looked down at the messy pages of notes I'd been compiling. Business ideas, estimated costs, supplier contacts, and felt something shift. This wasn't about refusing a bad salary anymore. This was about protecting something meaningful, something real. The next 2 weeks crawled by. I held myself to the highest standard. Still showing up, still doing my best. But the atmosphere had changed. Brian was everywhere, constantly hovering in the background during my appointments, clipboard in hand, observing efficiency. He even scheduled my exit interview for the final day and made a point of sending daily reminders about a so-called non-solicitation agreement that my lawyer friend assured me wouldn't hold up in Kentucky. What he didn't know was that I'd already signed a lease for a building just a short drive across town. It used to be a pediatric office, clean, functional, and perfectly suited to become a veterinary space. I'd secured a loan with my longtime credit union, and some of my old equipment vendors were offering me flexible terms. One of them, my main medical supply rep, met me for lunch and quietly said, "We've seen what happens when clinics get bought out. Quality drops, staff turnover spikes. We support independence whenever we can." Back at the clinic, I stayed tight-lipped about my plans, but rumors were swirling. Clients were starting to ask carefully worded questions. "So, will you still be in the area?" One woman asked while I looked at her pug's ear infection. "I haven't finalized anything yet," I replied with a neutral smile, aware of the new audio recording system they'd just installed. She leaned closer. "Well, when you do, let me know. Max won't go to anyone else." That kind of exchange became a near-daily occurrence, and each one reminded me, this wasn't just a business. It was a relationship-based practice, something no spreadsheet or algorithm could replicate. Midweek, Brian pulled me into his office again. His tone was clipped. "We're getting a lot of questions from clients about your next steps." "I've been careful not to share any plans," I replied, calm and professional. He drummed a pen on the desk. "We made a significant investment acquiring this clinic, Dr. Marlowe. Any disruption to that would be taken very seriously." "I understand." I met his eyes. "Is there anything else?" He studied me for a beat. "We're willing to revisit the salary offer. Maybe we came in too aggressive." I paused. For a split second, I wondered if he was finally realizing the damage they'd caused. But it was too late. The lease was signed, supplies were en route, my dream had a name, Willow Creek Animal Hospital, and the plan was already rolling. "I appreciate the offer," I told him, "but I've made my decision." Later that afternoon, Layla slipped a folded note onto my desk. Inside were 20 names, clients who had called that day asking specifically for me. At the bottom she'd written, "When you're ready to hire a receptionist, you've got my number." That night, I met Reed and Rosa at a quiet little coffee shop across town, just far enough that no one from work would show up. Over mugs of dark roast, I told them everything. I signed the lease. Willow Creek is opening on Riverbend Road, 6 weeks out, if all goes to plan. 6 weeks? Rosa said, her eyes lighting up. That's right, when they're cutting my hours to part-time. Reed leaned in. What's the team going to look like? I need a co-vet I can trust, I said, looking straight at him. And a lead tech who knows what she's doing. They didn't need to say a word. The grin said everything. By the time we stood up from that table, the foundation for my new team was unofficially in place. But I had no idea that Northwell, the corporate group, was about to push me even harder. And much sooner than I expected. The next morning, I walked into the clinic and noticed something posted on the break room bulletin board. It was a new fee schedule, effective immediately. Prices were up across the board. Vaccines that had been $45 were now $65. Teeth cleanings jumped from $300 to $425. But that wasn't even the worst of it. The bulletin highlighted wellness bundles, package deals full of expensive tests most pets didn't need. One package, labeled comprehensive, included 3 major screenings for animals who were perfectly healthy. They're not even pretending anymore, muttered Jenna, a junior vet tech who had just started before the acquisition. Dr. Stein told me we have to pitch the premium package to everyone today. My stomach twisted. When Mrs. Whitaker came in with her elderly tabby Luna, just for an arthritis follow-up, I was stuck. The new rules said I had to recommend a full senior panel that cost nearly $500, even though I had just run those tests 2 months ago. Is that really necessary so soon? She asked gently, clearly anxious. She lived on a fixed income and carefully budgeted for Luna's care. The company has new protocols, I explained cautiously. But in my opinion, based on Luna's last results, we can wait another 4 months. She smiled with relief, but that moment was cut short. Brian walked right into the room. Mrs. Whitaker, I'm Brian Hayes, Regional Director. I noticed we haven't scheduled Luna's senior wellness package yet. He launched into a polished sales pitch. He talked about early detection, long-term outcomes, even threw in a special one-time discount. And just like that, I watched Mrs. Whitaker go from calm to confused to guilty to signing off on a test her cat didn't need. She held her purse tighter as she left. Afterward, Brian pulled me into the hall. When we roll out protocols, we expect the vets to support them. They're unnecessary, I said quietly but firmly. This isn't medicine, it's manipulation. This is standardized care, he replied. You're letting personal attachments get in the way of your professional judgment. I almost laughed. It's not an attachment, it's called trust, and that's why people come here. He looked at his watch. Fortunately, we only have to manage your style for one more day. That day drained me. Every appointment, Brian loomed. Every hesitation to upsell drew a side eye or a subtle rebuke. As I updated Luna's file at the end of the day, I noticed something chilling. There was a note. Primary vet changed to Dr. Stein, Dr. Marlowe removed. They were stripping me of my own patients before I'd even walked out the door. I went home that night wide awake. I'd wanted a quiet exit, a graceful transition. But Northwell had made it clear they weren't interested in grace. So at 2 a.m., I emailed my lawyer. Can we fast-track the opening, even if it's limited at first? She replied almost instantly, with a few rental units and creative scheduling, possibly 2 weeks. Call me tomorrow. I closed my laptop and finally breathed. Tomorrow was my last day at Westside Veterinary, and it wasn't going to end the way Brian thought it would. The next day, I walked into the clinic knowing it would be my last, and that I was done playing quiet. At noon, Brian called me into the conference room for what he called a departure protocol meeting. I expected the usual exit routine: return my badge, sign off on final forms, maybe a bland "thanks for your years of service." But instead, I found Brian already seated with 2 strangers. One introduced herself as Northwell's legal counsel, the other as their HR representative. Brian opened with a cold smile. Before we proceed with your exit, we need to address a few concerns. The attorney slid a folder across the table. This is a cease and desist, she said. It states that you are prohibited from opening a veterinary practice within 20 miles of this clinic for the next year. I glanced at it, but didn't pick it up. I don't remember signing a non-compete agreement. It was included in the employee transition package all staff signed when Northwell took over. She replied smoothly. Actually, I said, reaching into my bag, I reviewed everything I signed, with legal help. No such clause exists. I pulled out a neatly organized binder and placed it on the table. My lawyer confirmed it yesterday. The mood in the room shifted. Brian looked thrown off, and the attorney glanced sideways at the HR rep. And continued, keeping my voice calm, even if such a clause existed, Kentucky has strict laws limiting non-competes for medical professionals, including vets, especially when community care is at stake. Brian's confidence wavered. We're not here to argue legal nuances, he said, trying to regain control. We just want to ensure client transitions are smooth. Your clients, I corrected gently. And yes, I agree. Their care should never be disrupted. The HR rep suddenly shifted to a softer tone, likely realizing their legal threat wasn't going to stick. Dr. Marlowe, we know you've served this community for a long time. Maybe there's a solution that works for everyone. I smiled. I'm always open to reasonable solutions. 2 hours later, we reached an agreement. I would refrain from actively reaching out to Oakwell clients for 30 days, and in return, Northwell would drop all attempts to limit where or when I could practice. It wasn't ideal, but it gave me the room I needed to move forward. I left that meeting officially free. I boxed up my things, hugged Layla and Rosa, and gave Reed a firm handshake. As I walked out of the clinic for the last time, I didn't look back. Just as I got in my car, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Layla. Just overheard Brian on the phone with corporate. He said, she's just one vet. How much impact could she really have? I grinned and texted back. Guess we'll find out. What they didn't know was that everything was already in motion. Willow Creek Animal Hospital opened its doors exactly 17 days later. 17 exhausting, exhilarating, chaotic days, filled with late nights, temporary equipment rentals, duct-taped floors, and enough caffeine to float a corgi. Reed joined me as my second vet. Rosa came aboard as lead tech once her hours were slashed to part-time at Oakwell. Layla resigned the day we installed our reception desk, citing hostile environment and ethical conflicts in her HR letter. Our first day was meant to be a soft open, no ads, just a few appointments from clients who needed follow-ups or refills. I had only called 20 people directly, pet parents whose animals needed continuity of care. But by 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes before we opened, I looked out our front window and nearly cried. There was a line, a real line, stretching from the door down the sidewalk, wrapping around the tiny parking lot. Reed peeked out from behind the curtain. "Did you call all of them?" I shook my head. "I only contacted a handful." Layla, already seated at her brand new desk, grinned. Word got around. And sure enough, the moment the doors opened, in they came. Like a homecoming parade. There was Mrs. Jenkins with Baxter, the Garcias with their 3 rescue cats, Mr. Howard with his ancient tortoise, Tank. People came in carrying folders, crates, leashes, and stories. "We saw it on Facebook," one woman told me. "We wanted to be here on your first day." By lunch, we'd entered over 70 pets into the system. By closing time, we'd doubled that. Each client said the same thing. They weren't loyal to the brand. They were loyal to me, to us. The part that touched me the most, the small gestures. Someone brought fresh baked cookies. A little girl handed us a card that said, "Thank you for taking care of Fluffy." One family brought a giant pizza for the whole team, just because they knew we wouldn't stop to eat. That night, after we shut off the lights and locked up for the first time, I checked my phone. A text from a vet still working at Oakwell lit up the screen. "Emergency meeting tomorrow. The schedule's a ghost town." The following week blew my expectations out of the water. We had planned for a slow ramp-up. Instead, Willow Creek Animal Hospital was slammed from the moment we opened. By day 3, we had to extend our hours just to keep up. By the end of the first month, we had registered over 800 pets, which, as we later tallied, accounted for about 70% of Oakwell's former client base. I was stunned, not just by the numbers, but by how they found us. We hadn't done any big marketing push. Just a modest announcement in the local paper and some word of mouth in neighborhood circles. No Facebook ads, no flashy signs, and still, they came. Clients would say things like, "My neighbor told me you opened. Someone in the dog park group posted about you. I heard you stood up to Northwell. That's the kind of vet I want." I never set out to be some local symbol of resistance. I just wanted to protect the way I practiced medicine, with integrity, compassion, and transparency. But somehow, that message resonated far beyond what I imagined. People were done with corporate markups and impersonal service. They wanted a place where their pets weren't just chart numbers and billing codes. 3 months after we opened, I had a surprise visitor. Dr. Emerson, the man who originally hired me, who had built Oakwell from scratch and sold it with the best intentions, walked through our doors. "I had to see it for myself," he said, looking around the bright, bustling lobby with a smile. "You've really built something, Kendra." Clients recognized him. Some stopped to shake his hand. Others told him how much they missed him, but how grateful they were to be here now. As we toured the clinic together, he lowered his voice. "I made a mistake selling to Northwell," he admitted. "I should have come to you first." I gave him a soft smile. It all worked out the way it was supposed to. That afternoon, as I was finishing up chart notes and sipping a lukewarm cup of tea, an email came through. It was from Brian Hayes. "Would you be open to a meeting regarding the shifting veterinary landscape in the area?" I smirked and typed back, "Sure. I'm available next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Nothing personal. Just business." As I looked around my new clinic, at the familiar faces of my team, the happy wagging tails, the sound of a kitten purring behind the front desk, I felt it deep in my chest. This was what I was meant to build. Sometimes the best kind of revenge isn't loud. It's not about anger or ego. Sometimes the best revenge is doing it your way and thriving.